Poor 6-year-old girl begs a paralyzed millionaire for food scraps to share with her sick mother. Playfully and unaware of her true intention, he says, "Make me walk again and the leftovers are yours, haha." Then, for the first time, he feels his legs. Before we get into it, if this video found you at the right moment, let me know with your favorite emoji. The cold October wind whistled through Emma Miller's thin cotton dress as she stood outside the grand Harrington estate. At 6 years old, she was too small to reach the ornate brass knocker, but determination glinted in her deep blue eyes. This wasn't about her, it was about Mommy, who hadn't eaten in 2 days, so Emma could have the last of their food. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, clutching her small stuffed rabbit, the only toy she owned, for courage. The massive iron gates that had intimidated her from afar now stood mysteriously open. The gardener had left for the day, but Emma had watched from across the street as servers carried trays of fancy food into the mansion. There would be leftovers. There always were at rich people's parties. Mrs. Peterson at school had told her that rich people threw away more food than Emma and her mother ate in a week. Emma slipped through the gate and crept along the curved driveway, staying close to the perfectly trimmed hedges. The mansion loomed above her, windows glowing like golden eyes in the gathering dusk. Music and laughter spilled from inside, sounds as foreign to Emma as another language. Around the back, she found what she was looking for, the service entrance. Gathering her courage, she knocked timidly. No answer. She knocked harder, her small fist barely making a sound against the heavy door. Just as she raised her hand to try again, the door swung open. A tall man in a black suit looked down at her with surprised eyes. I'm sorry to bother you, sir," Emma said, her voice barely audible, "but I was wondering if maybe you had any food left over. Just scraps would be fine. It's not for me, it's for my mommy. She's sick." The man's face softened. "Wait here," he said, and disappeared inside. Emma shifted from foot to foot, hugging her rabbit tighter. The wind felt colder now, cutting through her thin dress. When the door opened again, a different person stood there, a woman in a uniform. "Come with me, child," she said, not unkindly. "Mr. Harrington wants to see you." Emma's heart pounded. Mr. Harrington, the millionaire who owned this palace. She'd seen his picture in the newspapers Mrs. Peterson sometimes brought to class. She followed the woman through gleaming hallways that seemed endless, past rooms bigger than her entire apartment. Finally, they reached a massive library where a man sat in a wheelchair beside a roaring fire. He had grey hair and sharp eyes that seemed to look right through her. His face was lined with age and something else, pain perhaps, or bitterness. "So," he said, his voice deep and imposing, "you're the little beggar at my back door." Emma swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to intrude. My mommy hasn't eaten in 2 days, and I thought maybe—" "Where is your father?" Richard Harrington interrupted. "He left when I was a baby," Emma replied simply. "Mommy says he wasn't ready to be a daddy." Something flickered in the man's eyes. "And what's your name, child?" Emma Miller, sir." "Well, Emma Miller, do you know who I am? You're Mr. Harrington. You own this big house and lots of other things too." A cold smile touched his lips. "Yes, I own many things. But do you know what I don't have?" Emma shook her head. "I can't walk, haven't been able to for 3 years. He gestured to his wheelchair. "All my millions, and I can't buy back my legs." Emma looked at the wheelchair, then back at Mr. Harrington's face. "I'm sorry, sir." The man studied her for a moment, then laughed, a sound without warmth. "Tell you what, little beggar, I'll make you a deal." "Make me walk again," Richard Harrington said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "and the leftovers are yours." "Hell, I'll throw in a feast for you and your sick mother," he laughed bitterly. "How about that?" Emma stared at him, her small face solemn. The rich man was making fun of her, she knew, but she didn't care. All that mattered was bringing food home to Mommy. "May I try, sir?" she asked quietly. Richard's laughter died abruptly. He hadn't expected this response. Most adults were intimidated by him, let alone children. "You actually think you can make me walk? Doctors from around the world have tried and failed." "I don't know, sir, but my mummy says we should always try, even when things seem impossible." Something in her innocent determination annoyed him. "Fine. Come here then, miracle worker. Show me what the finest medical minds in the country couldn't do." Emma approached cautiously, still clutching her stuffed rabbit. She stopped beside his wheelchair and looked up at him with those unnervingly serious blue eyes. "What's his name?" Richard asked, nodding toward the well-worn toy. "Mr. Whiskers," Emma replied. "He helps me be brave." "Well, you'll need all the courage you can get." "My legs have been useless since a car accident 3 years ago." Emma nodded solemnly. Then, with childlike directness, she placed her small hand on his knee. Richard opened his mouth to make another cutting remark. When he felt it, a warmth, a tingling sensation spreading from where her tiny fingers rested. His cynical words died in his throat. "Can you feel that, Mr. Harrington?" Emma asked. "Feel what?" he whispered, not wanting to believe. "Your legs getting warm. Sometimes when Mommy hurts, I hold her hand and she says the warm feeling helps." Richard stared at her in disbelief. For the first time in 3 years, he could feel sensation below his waist. The tingling spread from his knees to his ankles. "Impossible," he muttered. Emma looked up at him expectantly. "Did it work?" Before he could answer, Gloria Peterson, his long-time housekeeper, entered the library. "Sir, your guests are asking for you." "Tell them I'm indisposed," Richard snapped, not taking his eyes off Emma. After Gloria left, Richard leaned forward. "Do that again," he demanded. Emma placed both hands on his knees this time. The sensation returned, stronger now, like circulation returning to a limb that had fallen asleep, but throughout both legs. "Try to move your toes," Emma suggested innocently. Richard almost laughed at the absurdity until he saw his right foot shift slightly, just a centimeter, but it moved. "My God," he whispered. For the first time in years, hope flickered inside him, hope he'd long ago abandoned. Then suspicion darkened his features. "Who sent you? Was it Michael?" His voice turned cold. "Is this some kind of trick my son cooked up to get his hands on my money?" Emma's eyes widened in confusion. "Nobody sent me, sir. I just wanted food for my mommy." Richard studied her face, searching for deception but finding only innocence. After a long moment, he pressed a button on his wheelchair. Gloria reappeared instantly. "Sir?" "Pack up all the leftovers from tonight's dinner," he ordered, "and call Dr. Wilson. Tell him to come first thing tomorrow morning." "Yes, sir. And the child?" Richard looked at Emma's threadbare dress and worn shoes. "Where do you live, girl?" "West Side Apartments, sir. Building C, apartment 14, but it's not really an apartment anymore. It's just one room now." "The condemned building on Maple Street?" Gloria asked, shocked. Emma nodded. "Gloria, have Thomas bring the car around. We're taking this child home, and tell the kitchen to prepare a proper meal basket as well." After Gloria left, Richard turned back to Emma. "I'm going to drive you home and meet this mother of yours." "Really?" Emma's face lit up. "And can I have the leftovers like you promised? Child, if what just happened is real, you can have far more than leftovers." Sarah Miller's fingers trembled as she tried to thread the needle. The dim light from their single bulb made sewing nearly impossible, but the Andersons next door had promised $5 if she could mend their children's school uniforms by morning. $5 meant medicine for her persistent cough and maybe some bread and soup. She glanced at the cracked digital clock on the nightstand, 8:47 p.m. Emma should have been back from her friend Lily's house an hour ago. Sarah had hated sending her there at dinner time. It felt like begging, but Lily's mother had insisted after seeing how thin Emma had become. A knock at the door startled her. Heart racing, she set aside her sewing. No one ever visited them, especially not after dark. The neighborhood wasn't safe. "Who is it?" she called, her voice hoarse. "Mommy, it's me. I brought food." Sarah rushed to open the door, relief flooding through her. But her relief turned to shock when she saw not only Emma, but a well-dressed older man in a wheelchair and an elegant woman carrying several large bags. "Emma, what? Who?" she stammered. "This is Mr. Harrington, Mommy, and Miss Gloria. They brought us food." Sarah recognized Richard Harrington immediately. His face regularly appeared in the Boston business sections. What was a millionaire doing at their door? "Mrs. Miller," Richard said, his keen eyes taking in the sparse room, the single bed, the hot plate on a milk crate, the clothesline strung across one corner. "May we come in?" "Of course," Sarah managed, self-consciousness washing over her. She smoothed her worn sweater and brushed a strand of brown hair from her face. "I'm sorry about the accommodations." "No apologies necessary," Richard replied, as Gloria placed the bags on the small table. "Mommy, look!" Emma exclaimed, pulling out containers of food. "There's chicken and potatoes and vegetables and even cake." Sarah looked at Richard suspiciously. "I don't understand. Why would you bring us food?" "Your daughter came to my home tonight asking for leftovers," Richard explained. "She said you were ill." Sarah's face paled. "Emma, you didn't." She turned to Richard. "I'm so sorry, sir. I had no idea she would do such a thing. We're not beggars." "Mommy, I had to," Emma said. "You gave me your food again, and I saw you hiding your medicine because we couldn't buy more." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she knelt to embrace her daughter. "Oh, sweetheart." Richard watched the exchange, something stirring within him that he hadn't felt in years. "Mrs. Miller," he said finally, "your daughter did something extraordinary tonight, something I can't explain." Sarah looked up, wiping her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I've been paralyzed from the waist down for 3 years. No sensation, no movement. The best specialists in the world gave me no hope of recovery." He paused. "When your daughter touched my legs, I felt them for the first time since my accident. I could even move my toes." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. That's not possible." "I would have said the same thing this morning," Richard replied. "Yet it happened." "Show her, Mr. Harrington," Emma urged. Under their watchful eyes, Richard concentrated on his right foot. Slowly, visibly, his foot lifted an inch off the footrest. Sarah gasped. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Neither do I," Richard admitted. "But I intend to find out." He looked directly at Sarah. "Mrs. Miller, I'd like to make you an offer. I want Emma to visit me regularly to see if this phenomenon continues. In exchange, I'll provide proper housing for you both, medical care for your condition, and ensure Emma receives a good education." Sarah stiffened. "Mr. Harrington, I appreciate your generosity, but Emma is not some medical curiosity to be studied." "And I won't accept charity." "It's not charity," Richard countered. "Consider it a business arrangement. Your daughter provides a service no one else can, and I compensate you accordingly." "And if nothing more happens? If tonight was just some strange coincidence? Then you'll still have better housing and health care, and I'll have satisfied my curiosity." Sarah coughed suddenly, a deep, rattling sound that seemed to come from her very core. Emma looked at her with worried eyes. "Please, Mommy," Emma whispered. "Mr. Harrington was nice to me, and you need a doctor." Sarah looked from her daughter to Richard, conflict evident in her tired eyes. "1 week," she finally said. "We'll try for 1 week." Dr. Thomas Wilson had been Richard Harrington's physician for over 20 years. He'd guided him through heart palpitations, stress-induced ulcers, and finally the catastrophic spinal injury that had confined Richard to a wheelchair. In all that time, he'd never seen Richard as animated as he was this morning. It's unprecedented, Thomas, Richard insisted, pacing back and forth in his wheelchair. The sensation has remained. I can feel pressure, temperature, even this. He pinched his own thigh. Dr. Wilson frowned, setting down his stethoscope. Richard, I've examined you thoroughly. There's definitely increased neural activity compared to your last evaluation 6 months ago, but there's no medical explanation for such a sudden improvement. No medical explanation, Richard repeated incredulously. Then how do you explain this? He concentrated intensely, and his right foot lifted from the footrest again, higher than yesterday. Dr. Wilson's professional composure slipped momentarily, his eyes widening. That's remarkable. It's a miracle, is what it is, Gloria interjected from where she stood by the door. It's not a miracle, Dr. Wilson replied, his scientific mind rejecting the notion. There must be a physiological explanation. Perhaps the nerve pathways have been slowly healing all along, and we've reached a tipping point. Richard shook his head impatiently. For 3 years you've told me the damage was permanent. Then a 6-year-old girl touches my legs, and suddenly I'm regaining function. That's one hell of a coincidence. Speaking of this child, Dr. Wilson said, where is she now? Gloria is helping her mother get settled in the guest house, Richard replied. I've arranged for them to stay on the property temporarily. Dr. Wilson raised an eyebrow. That's unusually generous of you, Richard. Don't look at me like that, Thomas. This isn't charity, it's a business arrangement. A business arrangement with a 6-year-old. Dr. Wilson couldn't keep the skepticism from his voice. Before Richard could respond, there was a knock at the door. Gloria entered with Emma and her mother. Ah, perfect timing, Richard said. Dr. Wilson, meet Emma and Sarah Miller. Dr. Wilson observed them with professional interest. The mother was thin and pale, with the shadow of once beautiful features. She carried herself with dignity, despite her obvious exhaustion. The child was remarkably self-possessed for her age, with observant blue eyes that seemed to take in everything. Mrs. Miller, it's a pleasure, Dr. Wilson said, extending his hand. And you must be the famous Emma. Emma nodded solemnly. Are you going to help Mr. Harrington walk again? That's the goal, young lady, though I admit I'm somewhat at a loss as to how to proceed. Perhaps a demonstration, Richard suggested. Sarah looked uncertain. Emma, you don't have to do anything you don't want to. It's okay, Mommy, Emma replied. I want to help. She approached Richard's wheelchair without hesitation. Unlike most children who would have been intimidated by the formal medical setting, Emma seemed perfectly at ease. She placed her small hands on Richard's knees, just as she had the previous evening. The room fell silent. Doctor. Wilson watched with scientific scrutiny. Sarah observed with maternal concern. Gloria looked on with undisguised hope. I feel it, Richard whispered after a moment, the warmth spreading down to my feet. Dr. Wilson stepped closer, his skepticism fighting with the evidence before his eyes. Richard's legs, normally pale and slightly atrophied, had gained color. Using a reflex hammer, Dr. Wilson tapped below Richard's knee. To his astonishment, there was a visible response, slight but unmistakable. Incredible, he murmured. Try to stand, Mr. Harrington, Emma suggested. Emma, Sarah cautioned, Dr. Wilson should decide what's safe. But Richard was already releasing the brake on his wheelchair. Help me, Thomas, he commanded. Dr. Wilson hesitated, then positioned himself to support Richard. This is highly irregular, Richard. Your muscles have atrophied significantly. Even if neural function is returning, your strength, just do it, Richard snapped, with Dr. Wilson on one side and Gloria hurrying to support the other. Richard pushed himself upward. His legs trembled violently, barely supporting his weight. Sweat beaded on his forehead from the effort. For 5 seconds, 10, 15, he remained upright before collapsing back into the wheelchair. My God, Dr. Wilson breathed. Richard's face was transformed by exhilaration, despite his exhaustion. It's real, he said, looking at Emma with wonder. Whatever you're doing, it's real. The Harrington Estates guest house was larger than any home Sarah had ever lived in. With 3 bedrooms, a full kitchen, and a living room with windows overlooking the immaculate gardens, it felt like a palace after their single room at Westside Apartments. Emma had been ecstatic, running from room to room, exclaiming over the soft beds and the fully stocked refrigerator. "Look, Mummy, a real bathtub, and it's so clean!" Now, as Sarah unpacked their meager belongings, everything they owned fit in 2 small bags, she couldn't shake her unease. Richard Harrington's offer seemed too good to be true, and in her experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Gloria Peterson stood there with a garment bag and shopping boxes. "Mrs. Miller," Gloria said warmly, "I hope you're settling in comfortably." "Yes, thank you," Sarah replied. "It's very generous. Mr. Harrington asked me to bring these for you and Emma." Gloria placed the packages on the sofa, some essentials to start with. "There are more clothes arriving tomorrow." Sarah felt her pride bristle. "That's very kind, but we can't accept—" "Mrs. Miller," Gloria interrupted gently, "may I speak frankly?" Sarah nodded cautiously. "I've worked for Mr. Harrington for nearly 20 years. I've never seen him like this, hopeful, energized. Whatever your daughter did, it's given him something he thought was lost forever." Gloria paused. "He's not a man accustomed to feeling indebted to anyone. Letting him help you is, in a way, helping him." Sarah considered this. "Has he always been so difficult?" Gloria smiled slightly. "Mr. Harrington built his fortune from nothing. He's brilliant, driven, and yes, often harsh. But he wasn't always the bitter man you met yesterday. The accident changed him." "What happened?" Gloria's expression darkened. 3 years ago, Richard was driving with his son Michael when another car ran a red light. Richard swerved to protect Michael and took the full impact himself. The spinal damage left him paralyzed. Michael walked away without a scratch. "His son must be very grateful," Sarah observed. "One would think," Gloria replied with a hint of sadness. "Michael and his father had a complicated relationship even before the accident. Afterward, Michael couldn't handle his father's bitterness. They barely speak now." Sarah absorbed this information, feeling her perspective on Richard shift slightly. "Mr. Harrington has scheduled another session with Emma tomorrow morning, if that's agreeable," Gloria continued. "Dr. Wilson will be present to monitor everything." "And if I say no?" Sarah asked. "Then that's your decision, Mr. Harrington would be disappointed, but he understands that Emma's welfare comes first." Gloria smiled at Sarah. "He's many things, but he's not a monster." After Gloria left, Sarah opened the packages. Inside were clothes in exactly the right sizes for both of them. Simple but high quality. There were also toiletries, books for Emma, and a smartphone with a note explaining it was programmed with all necessary contacts. Sarah sat on the edge of the sofa, overwhelmed. For 3 years since her husband abandoned them, she'd shouldered every burden alone. When her health began failing 6 months ago, the constant stress of survival had become almost unbearable. Now, suddenly, they had safe housing, food, and the promise of medical care. But at what cost? What if Richard's interest in Emma's apparent ability turned exploitative? What if this miracle faded, and with it Richard's generosity? The sound of Emma's laughter floated in from outside. Sarah moved to the window and saw her daughter in the garden, being shown a butterfly by the elderly gardener. Emma looked happier than she had in months. For now, Sarah decided, they would stay. She would remain vigilant, protect Emma's interests, and perhaps, just perhaps, allow herself to hope that this strange turn of events might lead somewhere good. Meanwhile, across the estate in the main house, Richard sat in his study reviewing medical files. not his own, but Sarah Miller's. Dr. Wilson had examined her that morning and confirmed what Richard had suspected. Sarah's persistent cough was actually early-stage pulmonary fibrosis, potentially treatable but requiring expensive medical intervention. Richard closed the file, his mind racing with possibilities. If Emma truly possessed some inexplicable healing ability, could it extend beyond his paralysis? Could she help her own mother? And if she could, what were the limits? What was the source of this power? Was it replicable, scalable, marketable? The businessman in him saw boundless opportunities. The man in him, the part he thought had died in the accident, felt something different, a responsibility to protect this gift and the child who carried it. Again, Emma, just like before, Richard instructed, his voice gentler than it had been in years. It was day 4 of their arrangement, and the changes were becoming impossible to ignore. Richard could now stand for nearly a minute, unassisted. The muscle atrophy was still significant, but sensation had returned to approximately 80% of his lower extremities, according to Dr. Wilson's tests. Emma placed her hands on Richard's knees, her face scrunched in concentration. After a moment, the now familiar warmth spread through his legs. "Good girl," Richard murmured. "Now let's try something new." With Emma's tiny hand in his, Richard pushed himself to standing. His legs trembled but held. Then, with excruciating slowness, he took one step forward, then another. "You're doing it, Mr. Harrington!" Emma exclaimed, delight brightening her features. "Doctor!" Wilson watched in amazement, scribbling notes furiously. "The progressive improvement defies all medical explanation," he muttered. "By all rights, your muscles shouldn't be strong enough for this yet." Richard took a third step before his strength gave out. Gloria rushed forward with the wheelchair just in time. "That's enough for today," Sarah interjected from where she sat nearby. Despite the remarkable progress, she remained vigilant during these sessions, watchful for any sign that Emma was being pushed too hard. "Just one more try," Richard insisted, his face flushed with exertion and excitement. "No, Mr. Harrington," Sarah said firmly. "Emma has school this afternoon, and you need to rest." Dr. Wilson said overexertion could cause setbacks. Richard looked like he might argue, but then relented with a sigh. "You're right, of course. Thank you, Emma. You've done wonderfully today." As Gloria escorted Emma and Sarah out, Dr. Wilson stayed behind. "You realize this could change everything we know about neurological recovery," he said once they were alone. "I've consulted with specialists, discreetly, as you requested, and no one has seen anything like it." "Have you discovered how she's doing it?" Richard asked. Dr. Wilson shook his head. "The equipment shows unusual electromagnetic activity when she makes contact with you, but nothing that explains the physiological response. It's as if—" He hesitated. "As if what, Thomas?" "As if she's somehow reactivating neural pathways through pure intention, willing your body to heal." Richard considered this. Could it work for other conditions, other patients? Theoretically, perhaps, but ethically, Richard, she's a child, not a medical device. "I'm well aware," Richard replied sharply. "I have no intention of exploiting her, but if she possesses a gift that could help others—" He trailed off, thinking of Sarah's condition. "One step at a time," Dr. Wilson cautioned. "For now, let's focus on your recovery and monitoring Emma for any negative effects." After the doctor left, Richard wheeled himself to the window. From there, he could see Emma in the garden, teaching Mr. Whiskers, her stuffed rabbit, how to have a tea party with the gardener's granddaughter who had come to visit. How strange that his salvation should come in such a small package. In just 4 days, Emma had given him more hope than he'd felt in 3 years. And it wasn't just the physical improvement. Something else was changing too. The bitterness that had encased his heart since the accident was beginning to crack. Richard's phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. The screen displayed a name he hadn't seen in months. Michael. With a deep breath, Richard answered. Michael, this is unexpected. Hello, Father, came his son's voice, formal and distant. I received a strange call from Dr. Wilson today, something about remarkable progress in your condition. Richard hesitated. He hadn't authorized Wilson to contact Michael. Thomas shouldn't have bothered you. So it's not true? You haven't regained any function? I didn't say that. Richard paused. There have been some developments. What kind of developments? Richard considered how to explain. The truth sounded absurd even to him, and Michael was nothing if not skeptical. It's complicated. If you're truly interested, you should come see for yourself. A long silence followed. Are you actually inviting me to visit? The surprise in Michael's voice sent a pang of regret through Richard. How bad had things become between them, that a simple invitation seemed shocking. Yes, Michael, I'm inviting you to visit. Another pause. I'll come tomorrow afternoon. After they hung up, Richard sat in silence, emotions he'd long suppressed rising to the surface. His relationship with Michael had been strained even before the accident. Richard's demanding nature and impossibly high expectations had driven a wedge between them. After becoming paralyzed, Richard's bitterness had widened that gap into a chasm. Now, with the possibility of walking again, Richard found himself wanting to bridge that distance. Perhaps Emma's healing touch extended beyond the physical. The thought of Michael meeting Emma suddenly made Richard uneasy. His son was shrewd, suspicious of anything that seemed too good to be true. Would he see Emma as Richard did now, a miraculous child with a pure heart? Or would he see what Richard himself might have seen just a week ago, an opportunity to exploit? Richard reached for his phone again, this time dialing his lawyer. There were preparations to make, protections to put in place, for Emma, for Sarah, and perhaps even for himself. Michael Harrington parked his silver Mercedes at the end of the long driveway, staring up at his childhood home with mixed emotions. At 32, he had built his own life away from his father's shadow, a modest investment firm that was finally gaining traction after years of struggle. He hadn't visited the estate in nearly 8 months, not since the disastrous Christmas dinner when Richard had accused him of waiting for his inheritance like a vulture circling a dying man. The bitter words still stung, but curiosity about his father's supposed improvement had drawn him back. That and Dr. Wilson's concerned phone call, suggesting he intervene before things got out of hand. As Michael approached the front door, he noticed unfamiliar laughter coming from the garden, a child's voice, high and clear. Following the sound, he rounded the corner of the house to find an extraordinary sight. His father, standing shakily between parallel bars installed on the terrace, taking halting steps, while a small girl clapped encouragingly. Michael froze, unable to process what he was seeing. Richard Harrington, the man doctors had unanimously declared would never walk again, was upright and moving. "That's it, Mr. Harrington," the child exclaimed. "3 more steps." Richard's face was contorted with effort, sweat darkening his shirt, but there was something else there too, a determination Michael hadn't seen since before the accident. "Father!" Michael called, stepping into view. Richard looked up, momentarily losing his concentration. His legs buckled, and he grabbed the bars to prevent a fall. "Michael!" Richard acknowledged, breathing heavily. "You're early." Apparently. Michael approached cautiously, eyes darting between his father and the little girl. "Doctor." Wilson mentioned improvement, but this. "Emma, this is my son, Michael," Richard said, lowering himself into the wheelchair positioned at the end of the bars. "Michael, meet Emma Miller." The child smiled politely. "Hello, Mr. Michael." Michael nodded absently, still processing the scene. "Father, could we speak privately?" "Emma, would you mind finding Gloria? Tell her Michael has arrived and ask if she could bring some refreshments to the study, Richard requested. Once Emma had skipped away, Michael turned to his father. What exactly is going on? Who is that child and how are you? He gestured to the parallel bars. Doing this. It's complicated, Richard replied, wheeling himself toward the house. Come inside. In the wood-paneled study, Richard poured himself a scotch, his first in 3 years. The ability to reach the crystal decanter himself, a small victory. Start talking, Michael demanded, declining a drink with a wave of his hand. Richard explained the events of the past week, watching his son's expression shift from skepticism to disbelief. You expect me to believe a 6-year-old girl has magical healing powers, Michael finally said. Father, this is absurd. Whatever improvement you're experiencing has a medical explanation. I thought the same thing, Richard admitted. I've had Dr. Wilson run every test imaginable. There's no medical explanation for the rate of my recovery. So you've moved this child and her mother into your home based on, what, a coincidence? A parlor trick? Richard's eyes narrowed. I've provided them with proper housing and care, which they desperately needed. In exchange, Emma is helping me walk again. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. And I suppose you've had this arrangement properly documented. Legal guardianship established, compensation formalized. Michael's tone was sharp, professional, the lawyer in him emerging. Not yet, but I've spoken with Bernard about setting up a trust for Emma's education and... For God's sake, Father, Michael interrupted. Do you hear yourself? You've invited complete strangers into your home, given them access to everything, based on some inexplicable phenomenon that defies medical science. Have you considered that this might be an elaborate con? Richard's face hardened. You think I haven't considered that? I've had them thoroughly investigated. Sarah Miller is exactly who she claims to be, a widowed seamstress with mounting medical bills and a daughter she's struggling to support. And this miraculous ability, you don't find the timing suspicious. Just when they're most desperate, the child develops healing powers. Before Richard could respond, there was a knock at the door. Gloria entered with a tray, followed by Emma carrying a small plate of cookies with intense concentration. I helped make these, Emma announced proudly, setting the plate down carefully. Thank you, Emma, Richard said warmly, his harsh expression softening instantly. Michael watched the interaction with narrowed eyes. The transformation in his father was jarring, from the bitter, isolated man of the past 3 years to this almost grandfatherly figure. After Gloria and Emma left, Michael leaned forward. I want to speak with Dr. Wilson directly, and I want to see these tests you mentioned. You think I'm being deceived, Richard stated flatly. I think you want to believe so badly that you're not asking the right questions, Michael countered. What do we actually know about this child? What's the scientific basis for what's happening? And most importantly, what do they want from you in the long run? Richard's jaw tightened. What Emma wants is food for her mother. What Sarah wants is medical care and safety for her daughter. Not everyone has an agenda, Michael. Everyone has an agenda, Father. You taught me that. A heavy silence fell between them, decades of tension condensed into a single moment. Stay for dinner, Richard finally said. Observe. Ask your questions. Then judge for yourself. Michael hesitated, then nodded. Fine. But I'm not promising to approve of whatever this is. I'm not asking for your approval, Richard replied coolly. I'm asking for an open mind, something I should have offered you more often. The unexpected admission caught Michael off guard. He studied his father, searching for the manipulation behind the words, but finding only genuine regret. I'll stay, Michael agreed, more softly now. But I'm still calling Dr. Wilson. Sarah Miller stared at the medical report in her hands, the words blurring through her tears. Doctor. Wilson had been thorough, more thorough than any doctor she'd seen in years. The diagnosis confirmed what she'd long suspected but couldn't afford to have treated: pulmonary fibrosis, advancing faster than typical cases. "The good news," Dr. Wilson had explained gently, "is that we've caught it before catastrophic deterioration. With proper treatment, we can slow the progression significantly." Proper treatment. The word seemed like a cruel joke after years of choosing between medicine and food, between her health and Emma's needs. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Sarah hastily wiped her eyes before opening the door to find Richard Harrington there, seated in his wheelchair despite his improving mobility. "Mrs. Miller," he said formally. "May I come in?" Sarah stepped back, allowing him to enter the guest house. "Dr. Wilson spoke with you?" she guessed, noting his grave expression. "He did," Richard confirmed. "I hope you don't mind. I asked him to be candid about your condition." "It's your right," Sarah replied. "You're paying for the examination." Richard frowned slightly. "This isn't about payment or obligation, Mrs. Miller. I'm concerned about you and about Emma." Sarah sank onto the sofa, suddenly exhausted. "How much time did he tell you I have?" "With aggressive treatment, several years, perhaps more." Richard wheeled closer. "I'd like to ensure you receive that treatment." "Why?" Sarah asked bluntly. "You've already been more than generous. You owe us nothing." Richard was silent for a moment. "Perhaps I feel I owe Emma everything." "Because she's helping you walk?" "Because she reminded me what it means to be human," Richard corrected. "Before Emma, I was merely existing. Now I'm living again. That's worth more than any treatment I could fund." Sarah studied him, searching for deception, but finding only sincerity. "Your son doesn't trust us," she observed. "I saw how he watched Emma at dinner." "Michael is protective," Richard acknowledged, "and skeptical by nature. His mother was the same way." "Was?" "Cancer, 12 years ago." Richard's eyes grew distant. "Michael was 20 then, old enough to understand, but young enough to still need his mother desperately." Sarah nodded, recognizing the shared pain of loss. "Emma's father left when I was 7 months pregnant. Said he wasn't ready for the responsibility." She gave a humorless laugh, as if I was. An understanding passed between them, two people who had faced life's hardest blows and kept moving forward. "Mrs. Miller, Sarah," Richard said, using her first name tentatively. "I have a proposal I'd like you to consider." Before he could continue, the door flew open and Emma rushed in, her face flushed with excitement. "Mommy, I saw a real fox in the garden. Mr. Thomas says they live in the woods behind the big house." Sarah forced a smile. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." Emma stopped, her extraordinary perceptiveness catching the tension in the room. "Are you okay, Mommy? You look sad." "I'm just tired, baby," Sarah assured her. Emma looked from her mother to Richard, her expression suddenly serious beyond her years. "Is Mommy sick again?" "Me?" Richard and Sarah exchanged glances, silently debating how much to reveal. "Your mother needs some special medicine," Richard explained carefully, "but Dr. Wilson is going to help her get better." Emma approached her mother, climbing onto the sofa beside her. "I can help too," she said with absolute certainty, "like I'm helping Mr. Harrington." Sarah stroked her daughter's hair. "Oh, sweetheart, it's different. Mr. Harrington had an injury. Mommy's sickness is inside, in my lungs." "I can still try," Emma insisted. Before either adult could respond, she placed her small hands on Sarah's chest, her face scrunched in concentration, the same expression she wore when working with Richard. Sarah began to gently move Emma's hands away, but Richard shook his head slightly. "Let her try," his eyes seemed to say. For a long moment, the room was silent, except for the ticking of the clock on the mantel. Emma's eyes were closed tight, her breathing slow and deliberate. Sarah felt nothing at first, then a subtle warmth spreading through her chest, different from the fever heat of infection, more like sunlight penetrating deep tissues. The constant ache that had become her companion eased slightly. "I feel something," she whispered, surprise evident in her voice. Emma opened her eyes, looking up at her mother hopefully. "Did it help?" "I'm not sure, sweetie," Sarah answered honestly. She took a deep breath and realized with shock that she didn't need to cough. For the first time in months, her lungs expanded fully without protest. Richard watched intently. "Sarah?" "The tightness," she said wonderingly. "It's less, not gone, but less." Emma beamed. "See, I told you I could help." Richard's expression shifted from concern to fascination. "Emma, how do you know what to do? How do you make the healing happen?" Emma shrugged, the question too complex for her 6-year-old understanding. "I just think about making the hurt go away, and then I feel warm inside, and the warm goes through my hands." "Have you always been able to do this?" Sarah asked gently. Emma thought for a moment. "I think so. I used to make your headaches better, remember? When I'd put my hands on your head and you'd fall asleep." Sarah's eyes widened. It was true. Emma had a habit of helping when Sarah had migraines, placing her tiny hands on her mother's temples. Sarah had always assumed it was the comfort of her daughter's touch that soothed her, never considering that something more might be happening. "Dr. Wilson should examine you again," Richard suggested, "tomorrow if you're willing, to see if there's any measurable change." Sarah nodded, still processing the implications. If Emma truly had this ability, if she could heal not just external injuries but internal disease, the possibilities were staggering and terrifying. "Mr. Harrington," she said slowly, "if Emma can do what we think she can, people will want to use her." Richard's face grew grave. "I know. That's what I came to discuss with you. We need to protect her, not just her welfare, but her gift. And to do that, I think we need to understand it better." "It started as a tingling," Richard explained to Dr. Wilson, demonstrating by flexing his feet. "Then warmth, then actual sensation. Now I can feel everything. Pressure, temperature, even pain." It was day 14 of what they now privately called the Emma Protocol. Richard sat on the examination table in his home medical suite, legs dangling over the edge, a position that would have been impossible 2 weeks ago. Dr. Wilson shook his head in amazement. "The MRI shows regeneration of neural pathways that were completely severed. It shouldn't be possible." "And yet it is," Richard replied. "The question is, how?" Michael, who had extended his visit indefinitely, leaned against the wall with arms crossed. "Have you considered genetic testing? Maybe there's something unique in her DNA." "Absolutely not," Sarah interjected firmly from where she sat nearby. "I won't have Emma treated like a lab specimen." "Mrs. Miller," Michael said with forced patience, "if we understood the mechanism, we could potentially help thousands of people with spinal injuries. Or you could exploit a 6-year-old girl," Sarah countered. "Turn her into a medical curiosity to be studied and prodded." Richard raised a hand, silencing them both. "No one is suggesting exploitation, but Michael raises a valid point about helping others." Sarah's expression remained stubborn. "Emma's gift is extraordinary, but she's still a child. Her welfare comes first." "I agree completely," Richard assured her, "which is why I've drawn up these papers." He gestured to a folder on the nearby desk. "A legal framework to protect Emma and ensure her future, regardless of what happens with her ability." Sarah accepted the folder cautiously. "What kind of framework?" "A trust fund for Emma's education through college, a health insurance policy for both of you, and legal guardianship provisions should anything happen to you." Sarah's eyes widened. "Guardianship?" "Only as a contingency," Richard clarified quickly. "Given your condition, it seemed prudent to establish a safety net." "And who would be this guardian?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer. "I would," Richard said, "unless you'd prefer to designate someone else." Michael made a small sound of disbelief. "Father, this is necessary," Richard finished firmly. "Emma has changed my life, Michael. I owe her security at minimum." Sarah began to respond when the door opened and Gloria appeared with Emma, who had been in the kitchen making cookies with the cook. "Look, Mommy, we made snickerdoodles," Emma proclaimed, offering a slightly misshapen cookie. The tension in the room dissipated as the adults turned their attention to the child. Sarah accepted the cookie with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Dr. Wilson, did you see? Mr. Harrington can almost walk by himself now," Emma said proudly. "I did see," Dr. Wilson replied kindly. "It's quite remarkable." Emma turned to Michael, offering him a cookie as well. Despite his reservations, Michael found himself charmed by her genuine sweetness. "Thank you, Emma." "You're welcome," she replied politely. "Are you still mad about me helping your daddy?" The direct question caught Michael off guard. "I'm not mad," he said carefully. "I'm just trying to understand how you're doing it." Emma considered this. "I don't know how. I just can. Like how some kids can sing really good or do math in their head." She paused, then added with childlike wisdom, "Sometimes special things just happen." Richard watched the exchange with interest. For all his initial skepticism, Michael seemed increasingly drawn to Emma, as everyone was. There was something about her beyond the healing ability, a pure-hearted empathy that touched even the most guarded individuals. "Emma," Dr. Wilson said gently, "may I ask you something? Have you ever helped someone heal before Mr. Harrington and your mother?" Emma thought for a moment. "I fixed Lily's finger when she got a paper cut at school. And Mr. Jenkins' dog was limping, and I petted his leg, and then he could run again." Sarah looked startled. "You never told me about Mr. Jenkins' dog." "You were sleeping, Mommy. It was when you were really tired all the time." The adults exchanged glances, processing this new information. Emma had apparently been using her ability instinctively, without understanding its significance. "Emma," Richard said carefully, "what's the biggest hurt you've ever fixed?" Emma's face grew solemn. "Grandma Rose was really sick last year. The doctors said she would go to heaven soon." Sarah gasped softly. "My mother recovered from stage 4 pancreatic cancer last spring. The doctors called it a spontaneous remission, a medical miracle. I just holded her hand a lot," Emma explained simply. "Every day when we visited the hospital." Dr. Wilson leaned forward. "And now your grandmother is well?" "She moved to Florida," Emma said with a shrug. "She sends me postcards with alligators on them." The implications hung heavy in the air. If Emma had unknowingly cured terminal cancer. "This changes everything," Michael murmured, his skepticism finally crumbling under the weight of evidence. "No," Sarah said firmly, pulling Emma closer to her side. "It changes nothing. Emma is still a little girl, not a miracle cure." Richard watched the protective fire in Sarah's eyes and made a decision. Sarah's right. Whatever we do next, Emma's childhood remains the priority. He reached for the parallel bars and pulled himself to standing, a movement that was becoming smoother each day. Slowly, deliberately, he took 4 steps without assistance. "Emma has given me back my mobility," he said, emotion thickening his voice. "I won't repay that gift by taking away her chance to be a normal child." Michael Harrington sat across from Janet Rhodes, his father's longtime publicist, in a downtown coffee shop far from the estate. The busy atmosphere ensured their conversation wouldn't be overheard. "You're sure about this?" Janet asked, reviewing the documents he'd provided. "It sounds implausible." "I've seen it with my own eyes," Michael replied. "My father is walking again, actually walking, after 3 years of paralysis. The medical community declared it impossible." Janet whistled softly. "And this child is responsible. Through what? Touch healing? Something like that." Michael sipped his coffee. "The point is, it's real and it works. The potential applications are limitless." So why come to me instead of going public through official channels? Why not medical journals, clinical trials? Michael leaned forward. Because my father is being overprotective. He's formed an emotional attachment to the girl and her mother. He's refusing to consider the broader implications. Janet studied him shrewdly. And you disagree with this approach. Think about it, Janet. A child who can cure paralysis, cancer, potentially any illness or injury. That's not something that should be kept private. It could change medicine forever. It could also create chaos, Janet pointed out. Every desperate parent, every terminal patient would descend on this child. It would be a media frenzy. Which is why we need to control the narrative, Michael countered. A carefully managed revelation, scientific validation, then a structured program to maximize the benefit while protecting the child. Janet tapped her pen against the table thoughtfully. Your father must have considered this. What's his position? Michael's expression hardened slightly. He wants to keep it quiet, at least for now. He's set up a trust fund for the girl, is treating the mother's pulmonary fibrosis, and acts like that's sufficient. And what do the mother and child want? The mother is protective, cautious. The child is 6. She doesn't understand the significance. Janet set down her pen. Michael, I've known you since you were a teenager. You've always been ambitious, strategic. What's your real interest here? Michael hesitated, then spoke with careful precision. I believe this discovery could be the most significant medical breakthrough of the century. It should be properly documented, researched, and implemented, not kept secret because of my father's emotional attachments. And the fact that Harrington Medical Technologies would be positioned to facilitate this implementation is just a coincidence? Janet asked skeptically. Michael didn't flinch. Business opportunities and humanitarian benefits aren't mutually exclusive. Janet gathered the documents. I'll help you prepare a strategy, but on one condition. Nothing goes public without your father's consent and the mother's agreement. This isn't just about medical advancement or business opportunities. It's about a child's life. Michael nodded reluctantly. Agreed. For now. Meanwhile, back at the Harrington estate, Emma sat on the terrace with Richard, watching birds at the feeder. In the 3 weeks since their first encounter, Richard had progressed from wheelchair to walker to cane. Today he sat in a regular chair, his wheelchair nowhere in sight. Mr. Harrington, Emma asked, breaking their companionable silence. Yes, Emma. Are you and Mr. Michael mad at each other? Richard sighed. Emma missed little. Not mad, exactly. We have different ideas about some things. About me helping people? Emma asked perceptively. Richard turned to her, surprised. You've been listening to our conversations. Emma nodded solemnly. Mr. Michael thinks I should help lots of people, not just you and Mommy. And what do you think about that? Richard asked carefully. Emma considered the question with the pure, uncomplicated reasoning of a child. I like helping people. It makes my heart feel big. She spread her hands over her chest to demonstrate. But sometimes after helping a lot, I get really, really tired. Richard frowned. Tired how? Like I need to sleep right away. And sometimes I get really hungry, like my tummy is empty even if I just ate. Alarm bells rang in Richard's mind. No one had considered the physical cost to Emma of these healing sessions. They'd been so focused on the miraculous results that they'd overlooked potential side effects. Emma, why didn't you tell us you were getting tired? Emma shrugged. Grown-ups were happy when I helped. I didn't want to make them sad. A wave of guilt washed over Richard. They had been so careful about Emma's emotional well-being, yet they'd missed something fundamental. Emma, listen to me, Richard said, taking her small hands in his. Your gift is extraordinary, but your health and happiness come first, always. If helping makes you tired, you must tell us immediately. Promise? I promise, Emma replied. But I still want to help you walk all the way better. Richard squeezed her hands gently. You already have, more than you know. Later that evening, Richard called an unexpected meeting in his study with Sarah, Dr. Wilson and Michael. We're suspending the healing sessions, Richard announced without preamble. What? Why? Michael demanded. Emma is experiencing fatigue and hunger after healing, physical symptoms we've completely overlooked, Richard explained. We have no idea what this energy transfer is doing to her body. Dr. Wilson looked troubled. I should have anticipated this. Any energy expenditure requires fuel. If Emma is somehow transferring healing energy, her body must be producing it at a cost. All the more reason to conduct proper studies, Michael argued, to understand the mechanism and ensure it's safe. Or all the more reason to stop, Sarah countered. Emma's health isn't something we experiment with. We need to find a balance, Richard said. Limited sessions, carefully monitored, with proper rest and nutrition for Emma. And absolutely no external involvement until we understand the full implications. Michael stood abruptly. This is short-sighted. There are people suffering who could benefit, and there's a 6-year-old girl who could be harmed, Richard interrupted sharply. My decision is final, Michael. After Michael stormed out, Dr. Wilson quietly suggested monitoring Emma's glucose levels and vital signs before and after healing sessions to better understand the physical demands. A reasonable compromise, Richard agreed, looking to Sarah for approval. She nodded reluctantly. But at the first sign of anything concerning, we stop completely. None of them noticed Gloria standing just outside the partially open door, or Michael speaking urgently into his phone as he strode away down the hall. Sarah woke to the sound of voices, urgent, agitated voices, coming from downstairs. Glancing at the clock, 5:47 a.m., she pulled on her robe and checked Emma's room. Her daughter slept peacefully, Mr. Whiskers clutched tightly against her chest. Following the voices, Sarah found Richard and Michael in a heated confrontation in the kitchen, with Gloria hovering nervously nearby. How could you do this without consulting me? Richard demanded, brandishing a tablet displaying a news website. The headline made Sarah's blood run cold. Miracle child, millionaire's secret cure. It wasn't supposed to go public yet, Michael was saying defensively. Janet was just preparing a strategy, which included leaking information to test public reaction. Richard's voice was ice. Don't insult my intelligence, Michael. I know how these things work. Sarah snatched the tablet, scanning the article with growing horror. There were no names or photographs, but the details were specific enough. A wealthy Boston businessman, recovering from paralysis thanks to a child with unexplained healing abilities. What have you done? Sarah whispered, looking at Michael with dawning comprehension. Michael straightened, defensive but unapologetic. What needed to be done? This discovery is too important to keep hidden. It wasn't your decision to make, Richard said. Emma is not your child. Her ability is not your property. No, it's not, Michael agreed. It belongs to humanity. Think of the suffering that could be alleviated. At what cost? Sarah interrupted, her voice rising. My daughter's childhood? Her safety? Her health? With proper management, Michael began. Management? Sarah echoed incredulously. She's a 6-year-old girl, not a medical device to be managed. Richard placed a steadying hand on Sarah's shoulder before turning back to Michael. How much does this source know? Who else have you told? Before Michael could answer, the house phone rang. Gloria answered it, her expression growing increasingly alarmed. Sir, she said after hanging up, that was security. There are reporters at the gate. 3 news vans so far. Richard's face darkened. Get Dr. Wilson here immediately, then call Bernard and have him prepare the helicopter. We need to move Sarah and Emma somewhere safe. Michael stepped forward. Father, be reasonable. We can control this situation. A press conference, proper scientific validation. You've lost the right to offer opinions on this matter, Richard cut him off. You betrayed my trust and put a child at risk. I did what you were too emotionally involved to do, Michael shot back. This discovery doesn't belong to you. No, Sarah said quietly, a dangerous calm settling over her. It belongs to Emma, and you've taken away her choice. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Dr. Wilson arrived, grim-faced, confirming what they already knew. The story was spreading rapidly. More reporters arrived, along with curious onlookers. Someone had leaked Emma's healing ability to social media, and the story was going viral. By mid-morning, Richard's private helicopter landed on the estate's helipad. The plan was simple: evacuate Sarah and Emma to Richard's private island off the main coast, while his legal team worked to contain the situation. Sarah stood in Emma's room, hastily packing essentials. Emma sat on the bed, confused by the sudden chaos. "Are we going on vacation, Mommy?" she asked. Sarah forced a smile. "Something like that, sweetheart. An adventure. Is Mr. Harrington coming too?" "He'll join us soon," Sarah assured her, though Richard had been adamant that he needed to stay behind to handle the fallout. Emma clutched Mr. Whiskers tighter. "I don't want to go without saying goodbye." Sarah checked her watch anxiously. The helicopter was waiting, and security reported more media arriving by the minute. "We'll see him before we go," she promised. Downstairs, they found Richard in his study with Dr. Wilson and Bernard, his attorney. Richard's face lit up when Emma entered, though strain showed around his eyes. "There's my girl," he said warmly, opening his arms. Emma ran to him, climbing onto his lap, something that would have been impossible a month ago. "Are you coming on our adventure, Mr. Harrington?" Richard hugged her close. "Not right away, but I'll join you very soon. You and your mother need to take a little trip while I take care of some business here, because of the people outside. The ones who want me to help them." The adults exchanged glances. Emma, as usual, understood more than they realized. "Yes," Richard answered honestly. "People have heard about your special ability and they're very excited. But we need to make sure everything is organized properly before you meet anyone new." Emma nodded solemnly. "I can't help everyone at once. I'd get too tired." "Exactly," Richard agreed, relief evident in his voice. He reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a small box. "I have something for you. A going-away present." Emma opened the box to find a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a small rabbit like Mr. Whiskers. "It's beautiful," she gasped. "It's also special," Richard explained, helping her put it on. "See this tiny blue dot? It's a tracker, so I'll always know where you are. If you ever need me, just press it 3 times and I'll come right away." "Like magic?" Emma asked, eyes wide. "Like technology," Richard corrected with a smile, "but just as reliable." A sharp knock interrupted them. Gloria entered, looking anxious. "Sir, we have a situation. Someone's leaked the helicopter plan. There are reporters heading to the helipad now." Richard's face hardened. "Plan B, then. The boat." Bernard nodded, already on his phone, making arrangements. Richard turned back to Emma. "Slight change of plans, sweetheart. You and your mother are going to take my boat instead. It will be like a pirate adventure." Emma's eyes lit up. "With treasure?" "The greatest treasure of all," Richard said softly. "Your safety." Jeet, the morning sun sparkled on the Atlantic as Richard's yacht, Serendipity, cut through the waves toward his private island. On the aft deck, Emma watched dolphins play in the boat's wake, her excitement temporarily overshadowing the rushed departure and the tension emanating from the adults. Below deck, Sarah spoke quietly with Richard via satellite phone. "The news is everywhere," she said, scanning headlines on a tablet. "They're calling her the miracle child and offering rewards for information. Someone leaked that we left by boat." "Change course," Richard instructed immediately. "Bernard has arranged alternative accommodations in Canada. I'll text the coordinates." "Richard," Sarah hesitated. "There's something else. Social media is speculating about us. Us? You and me. They're suggesting I'm using Emma to secure your fortune, that this is some kind of con. Richard's silence spoke volumes. You believed that once too, Sarah reminded him, when we first met. For about 5 minutes, Richard admitted, before I saw Emma's pure heart and your fierce protection of her. No one could fake that. Michael still believes it, Sarah said softly. He thinks I'm manipulating you. Michael sees the world through a lens of suspicion. It's how I raised him, unfortunately. Richard's voice grew heavy with regret. I taught him to look for angles, motivations, weaknesses to exploit. Is it any wonder he can't recognize genuine goodness when he sees it? The conversation was interrupted by the captain's voice over the intercom. Mrs. Miller, Mr. Harrington asked me to inform you we're changing course. Also, radar shows another vessel approaching rapidly from the southwest. Sarah's heart raced. Could it be press? Paparazzi? Unknown, ma'am, but they're moving with purpose. Sarah ended the call and hurried to find Emma. As she reached the deck, she saw the approaching boat, sleek, powerful, closing fast. Emma, come inside, she called urgently. Emma turned, her smile fading at her mother's tone. But the dolphins? Now, Emma, Sarah insisted, reaching for her daughter's hand. Before they could reach the cabin door, the pursuing boat drew alongside. To Sarah's shock, she recognized Michael Harrington standing on the deck. Mrs. Miller, he called over the engines. I need to speak with you and Emma. It's urgent. Captain, maintain course, Sarah instructed firmly, pulling Emma closer. Please, Michael shouted. My father is in danger. They're coming for him too. Something in his voice, genuine fear, made Sarah hesitate. Who's coming for him? Government agencies, pharmaceutical companies, everyone with an interest in controlling Emma's ability. Michael's boat matched their speed perfectly. They raided the estate an hour after you left. Sarah's blood ran cold. Emma, go to our cabin and stay there, she instructed. Lock the door and don't open it for anyone but me. Once Emma was safely inside, Sarah nodded to the captain to slow down. Michael's boat drew alongside, and he jumped aboard with surprising agility. You have exactly 1 minute to explain, Sarah said icily. Michael ran a hand through his disheveled hair. This went too far, too fast. I never intended... He broke off, visibly struggling to maintain composure. When the story broke, everyone wanted a piece of it. Pharmaceutical companies seeing profit potential, research institutions, government health agencies. Then the religious groups started calling it divine intervention, and fringe elements began theorizing about extraterrestrial origins. You caused this, Sarah reminded him sharply. I know, Michael admitted, surprising her with his candor. But I'm trying to fix it now. Father is holding them off legally, but someone at the National Health Institute has classified Emma's ability as a resource of critical public health importance. They're seeking an emergency court order to compel her participation in studies. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. They can't do that. She's a child. They're arguing that the potential to save millions of lives outweighs individual rights. Michael's expression was grim. Father is fighting it, but it won't hold for long. We need to get Emma somewhere beyond their reach until we can establish legal protections. And why should I trust you now? Sarah demanded. After what you did? Michael met her eyes directly. Because despite our differences, we both want to protect Emma. And because my father asked me to help you. He pulled out his phone, showing a text from Richard. Find them. Keep them safe. Make this right. Before Sarah could respond, Emma's scream pierced the air. Sarah bolted for the cabin, Michael close behind. They found Emma pressed against the cabin wall, eyes wide with terror. Mommy! Mr. Harrington is hurt. I saw it! Sarah knelt beside her. What do you mean you saw it? In my head! Emma cried, tapping her temple frantically. He fell down, and there are bad men in his house, and he's calling for me. She thrust out her wrist, showing the bracelet. "It got hot, Mommy. It's the signal." Michael grabbed Emma's wrist, examining the bracelet. "The tracker. It has a panic function. It would only activate if Father were in serious danger. We have to go back." Emma insisted, tears streaming down her face. "He needs me." Sarah looked at Michael, seeing her own fear reflected in his eyes. "Could this be a trap, to draw us back?" "Possibly," Michael admitted. "But if my father is truly in danger—" Sarah made a swift decision. "We go back, but not directly to the estate. We need somewhere secure to assess the situation." Michael nodded. "I have a cabin in the woods nearby, completely off-grid. Father and I are the only ones who know about it." "Mommy, hurry," Emma pleaded. "Mr. Harrington is getting colder." The journey back was tense, with Emma growing increasingly agitated. "I can feel him, Mommy," she kept saying. "He's slipping away." When they finally reached the secluded cabin, Michael immediately established secure communications with his father's security team. The news was grim. Richard had suffered a massive stroke shortly after Sarah and Emma's departure. He was alive but unresponsive in the hospital, under guard from both his own security and government agents. "It's the stress," Dr. Wilson confirmed via encrypted video call. His blood pressure was dangerously high after the confrontation with the authorities. The stroke affected the left side of his brain. He's stable but critical. "I can help him," Emma said with quiet certainty, having listened from the doorway, "like I helped Grandma Rose." Sarah and Michael exchanged glances. "It's too dangerous," Sarah began. "The authorities—" "Will be focused on the hospital," Michael finished. "But I can get us in through the service entrance. Father's security team is still loyal to him, not the government agents." Sarah looked at her daughter, so small, yet so determined. "Emma, helping Mr. Harrington might make you very tired, more tired than ever before. A stroke is very serious." "I know, Mommy," Emma replied with that eerie wisdom that sometimes emerged. "But he saved us when we were hungry. Now I need to save him." 3 hours later, disguised as hospital staff, they slipped into Richard's private room. The sight of him, pale, motionless, connected to numerous machines, brought tears to Emma's eyes. "He looks like he's sleeping," she whispered. "He is, in a way," Dr. Wilson explained gently. "His brain is trying to heal itself." Emma approached the bed without hesitation. "I need to hold his head, like I did with Grandma Rose." With Sarah's help, Emma placed her small hands on either side of Richard's head. The room fell silent, except for the steady beeping of monitors. Minutes passed. Emma's face grew increasingly strained, her small body trembling with effort. Sweat beaded on her forehead. "Emma, that's enough," Sarah urged, growing alarmed. "Not yet," Emma insisted, her voice barely audible. "He's coming back. I can feel him." As if in response, Richard's fingers twitched, his eyelids fluttered. "Brain activity is increasing," Dr. Wilson reported, watching the monitors in astonishment. Emma swayed suddenly, her face deathly pale. Michael caught her just as she collapsed. "Emma!" Sarah cried, rushing to her daughter. "She's exhausted," Dr. Wilson said, checking her pulse. "Her blood sugar has crashed. She needs glucose immediately." As they tended to Emma, a weak voice came from the bed. "Emma?" Richard's eyes were open, confused but alert. "What happened? Where am I?" "Father!" Michael moved to his side. "You had a stroke. Emma brought you back." Richard struggled to sit up. "Where is she? Is she all right?" "She's depleted but stable," Dr. Wilson assured him. "Just as we feared, the healing takes a physical toll on her." Richard's gaze found Emma's unconscious form in Sarah's arms. "Oh my God, what have we done?" Hours later, when Emma finally woke in a private room adjacent to Richard's, her first words were, "Did I help Mr. Harrington?" Sarah, who hadn't left her side, nodded through tears. "Yes, baby. The doctors say it's miraculous. He's already regaining function that should have taken months of rehabilitation. Emma smiled weakly. Good. I was afraid I wouldn't be strong enough. Richard appeared in the doorway, walking with a cane, but otherwise showing remarkably few effects from the stroke. You were more than strong enough, he said softly. You were extraordinary. Michael stood behind his father, his expression transformed by what he had witnessed. The skeptical businessman had given way to something more humble, more human. Emma, Richard continued, approaching her bed, what you did for me, both times, I can never repay. But I can promise you this, your gift will remain yours to share as you choose, when you choose. No one will force you to use it. No one will study you without your permission. I will use every resource I have to ensure that. We both will, Michael added quietly. I was wrong, Emma. I'm so sorry. Emma looked between them, then at her mother. I just want to help people, she said simply, but not all at once, and not if it makes people fight. Sarah stroked her daughter's hair. We'll find a way, sweetheart, a way that protects you while allowing you to share your gift with those who truly need it. Richard nodded. A foundation, perhaps. Foundation. Strictly controlled, with you and your mother making all decisions, when you're older if you choose. And school, Emma asked hopefully. Can I still go to regular school? Of course, Sarah promised. You're a little girl first, miracle worker second. As evening fell, with Emma sleeping peacefully and security ensuring their privacy, Richard and Sarah stood at the hospital window, watching the sunset. What now? Sarah asked softly. The world knows about Emma. We can't put that genie back in the bottle. Richard took her hand, a gesture that felt natural despite its newness. Now we protect her, guide her, and give her as normal a childhood as possible. Together. Sarah turned to him, seeing not the bitter millionaire of their first meeting, but the man who had emerged, compassionate, determined, transformed by a child's simple act of kindness. Together, she agreed. In her bed, Emma dreamed of butterflies, gardens, and a world where hurts could be healed with a touch, not all at once, but one person at a time, starting with those who needed it most.